The date is April 1st, 1990. The Toronto Sky Dome is alive with the deafening roar of over 67,000 fans, each anticipating a night of spectacle that only WrestleMania 6 can deliver. The card is stacked with legends and rising stars, but few matches captivate the aura of theatrical villainy, quite like the clash between Demolition and the Colossal Connection. On one side stands the face-painted duo of Axe and Smash, beloved by the crowd for their unrelenting energy and raw power. Opposing them, however, is a pairing that exudes sheer menace: the legendary Andre the Giant and his enigmatic partner, Haku. Haku's presence in this match is as compelling as it is fearsome. He is a warrior, stoic, calculating, and dangerous. While Andre, towering and iconic, commands immediate attention, it is Haku who seems to embody the team's lethal edge. Together, they represent the zenith of villainy in the Federation's golden era, a perfect foil to the fan favorites Demolition. The match itself unfolds as high drama, with Andre's imposing frame and Haku's explosive ferocity creating moments of tension and awe. In a twist of fate, however, a mistimed kick by Haku strikes Andre, allowing Demolition to capitalize and secure the victory. It is epic theater, a blend of physicality and storytelling that underscores the brilliance of the Federation in its prime. Yet, for all the grandeur of this moment, Haku's true legend lies not just in the ring, but in the whispered tales that circulate backstage and beyond. While Andre the Giant looms large as a cultural phenomenon, Haku is revered in hushed tones for something far more primal: his reputation as the toughest man in wrestling. Stories of his off-screen exploits paint a picture of a man whose strength and ferocity are unmatched, a force of nature capable of silencing any challenger foolish enough to test him. Wrestlers, fans, and even barroom brawlers have all borne witness to the sheer, unyielding power of Haku. To understand Haku's journey to this point, to grasp how he became both a celebrated performer and a figure of mythic toughness, one must trace his roots to the islands of Tonga. Born Tonga, Uli Fifita, on February 10, 1959, Haku grew up immersed in the rich cultural traditions of his homeland. Yet at just 15 years old, he embarked on a life-changing journey when he was selected to join a group of young Tongans traveling to Japan to train in sumo wrestling. He eventually reached the rank of Makushita, but a dispute following the death of his stablemaster led to his forced retirement in 1976. This abrupt end marked the beginning of his journey toward professional wrestling stardom. Guided by former sumotori-turned-puroresu stars Genichiro Tenryu and Takashi Ishikawa, he began his professional wrestling career with their home promotion, All Japan Pro Wrestling. By the early 1980s, wrestling as King Tonga, Fifita had become a prominent heel in Montreal's international wrestling promotion under the management of Tarzan "The Boot" Tyler, feuding with stars like Dino Bravo. Though briefly teased as a face through dramatic tag team clashes, including a miscommunication that led to betrayal by Butch Reed and Tyler, Tonga's career expanded to Puerto Rico's World Wrestling Council, where he captured multiple championships. By 1985, his skills caught the attention of Vince McMahon, who was in the process of transforming the World Wrestling Federation into a global phenomenon. Tonga debuted as King Tonga at a television taping in August of 1985. Portraying a charismatic babyface. His star-making moment came the next year in 1986, when he famously body-slammed the towering Big John Studd on Championship Wrestling, though manager Bobby "The Brain" Heenan predictably reneged on the promised $15,000 reward. Tonga soon established himself in the Federation as Haku, one half of the Islanders alongside Tama. Initially a fan-favorite tag team, they achieved notable success, including a $50,000 tag team battle royal victory at Madison Square Garden in October 1986. Their transformation into villains came in 1987 during a match against the Can-Am Connection, where Bobby "The Brain" Heenan unveiled the Islanders as his new team, sparking a feud that continued even after the Connection dissolved. The Islanders then clashed with Strikeforce over the Tag Team Championship before igniting a memorable rivalry with the British Bulldogs, famously kidnapping their mascot, Matilda. This feud culminated in a six-man tag match at WrestleMania 4, where the Islanders and Heenan, humorously clad in an attack dog suit, triumphed over the Bulldogs and Coco Beware, with Heenan securing the pin. In 1988, following King Harley Race's legitimate injury, Haku was crowned King Haku in a regal ceremony, inheriting Race's crown and robe. As king, he faced Hulk Hogan, with Miss Elizabeth in Hogan's corner at Saturday night's main event, and later challenged Randy Savage for the World Heavyweight Championship, though he fell short. Haku solidified his reign by defeating the returning Harley Race at the 1989 Royal Rumble in a clash of kings at the Summit in Houston. Haku then teamed with Andre the Giant to form the Colossal Connection, capturing the Tag Team Championship from Demolition on an episode of Superstars. As highlighted earlier, their reign ended at WrestleMania 6 when Demolition regained the titles, with Haku never legally tagging in Andre due to the latter's declining health. A critical moment saw Haku accidentally striking Andre with a kick, leaving the Giant entangled in the ropes before Haku was pinned. Following the loss, their manager Bobby Heenan berated and slapped Andre, prompting the Giant to retaliate and fend off an attempted ambush by Haku before leaving to a thunderous ovation. Following WrestleMania 6, Haku became the first challenger to the new champion, the Ultimate Warrior, though he was unsuccessful. Omitted from SummerSlam, Haku faced Intercontinental Champion Kerry Von Erich in September house shows, but failed to secure a win before becoming embroiled in the Heenan family's feud with the Big Boss Man and participating in the 1990 Survivor Series. As autumn turned to winter, Haku feuded with the returning Davey Boy Smith, but found himself trapped in a protracted losing streak to close out the year. In early 1991, Haku teamed with fellow Heenan family member The Barbarian, their most notable bout being a loss to the Rockers in the opening match of WrestleMania 7. The partnership was brief, and Haku soon returned to singles competition, facing Ricky Steamboat on house shows. After competing in the 1992 Royal Rumble, Haku departed the federation to wrestle exclusively for Super World of Sports in Japan. Beyond the bright lights of the World Wrestling Federation, Haku's legend grew through tales of his exploits outside the ring. Stories of his toughness became the stuff of wrestling folklore, with countless accounts of Haku dismantling adversaries in real-world confrontations. In March of 1989, Haku was involved in a notorious altercation at a Baltimore airport bar after a group of men derided wrestling as fake. When one of them confronted Haku and his companion, Siva, the situation escalated. Haku responded by grabbing the man and biting off his nose, an act that cemented his reputation as someone not to be trifled with. Bobby the Brain Heenan once recounted witnessing Haku in a bar fight used just 2 fingers to reach into a man's mouth and snap his bottom teeth clean off. A feat so unbelievable that Heenan admitted he wouldn't have believed it had he not seen it himself. And then there was Kevin Sullivan, who witnessed a chilling incident during a visit he and Haku made to a tavern for a few beers before heading to their hotel. The atmosphere turned tense when a pool player insulted Haku, prompting an immediate and explosive response. Haku, moving with startling precision, seized his opponent by the throat and unleashed a devastating chokeslam, swiftly incapacitating him before knocking out another man who attempted to intervene. The situation escalated further when Haku, in a display of terrifying savagery, bit through the man's shirt, tore a chunk of flesh from his back, and spat it onto the floor, a moment Sullivan described as both surreal and unforgettable. Fellow wrestlers have repeatedly recounted how Haku's strength and combat skills made him both a respected and feared figure backstage. Even in an industry filled with colossal personalities, Haku stood apart as a man of unshakable resolve and unparalleled toughness. By 1992, Haku's time with the Federation had come to an end, but his wrestling career was far from over. He joined World Championship Wrestling in 1994. Once again, his toughness became a focal point, with commentators and storylines emphasizing his fearsome reputation. His 7-year WCW tenure included memorable matches against top stars like Sting and Lex Luger, as well as a reign as the Hardcore Champion, a title perfectly suited to his no-nonsense persona. Fifita's career, spanning decades and promotions, is a testament to his enduring legacy as one of professional wrestling's most revered figures. In the annals of wrestling history, few names resonate with the same combination of respect and fear as Haku. And while the tales of his toughness may border on the mythical, they serve as a reminder of the larger-than-life personalities that defined professional wrestling during its most electrifying era. The date is October 27, 1993. In a dimly lit hotel bar in the industrial town of Blackburn, England, two professional wrestlers are about to engage in a confrontation that will forever alter their lives. What began as a heated verbal exchange between Sid Justice and Arn Anderson will soon escalate into one of the most notorious real-life altercations in professional wrestling history. As the night wore on, tensions reach a breaking point when Anderson brandishes a broken bottle. Security Chief Doug Dillinger intervenes, sending both men to their rooms. But the night is far from over. In what can only be described as a moment of violent impulse, Sid storms Anderson's room, wielding a chair leg. The ensuing chaos will see Anderson retaliate with a pair of scissors, leading to a bloody encounter that left Anderson with 20 stab wounds and Sid with 4. If not for the intervention of fellow wrestler 2 Cold Scorpio, who discovered the scene and broke up the fight, wrestling history might have taken a far darker turn. Anderson lost a pint and a half of blood that night, a reminder of how quickly the theatrical violence of professional wrestling can spill into dangerous reality. Number 2. The line between performance and genuine animosity would blur again in the early 1990s, when former tag team partners Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty engaged in a brutal hotel room brawl. The catalyst was wrestling legend Rowdy Roddy Piper, who allegedly stoked tensions between the former friends until they erupted into violence. The situation became so volatile that local law enforcement arrived on scene, only to be talked down by none other than Macho Man Randy Savage. In a moment of quick thinking that would become wrestling folklore, Savage convinced the officers that the battered state of both men was simply part of a storyline they were practicing. The reality, however, was far more serious, as the fight was so severe that the Federation kept both performers off television for a month, and Michaels threatened to quit the company entirely. This real-life friction would eventually inform their legendary on-screen split, catapulting Michaels towards superstardom, while Jannetty's career gradually faded into obscurity. Number 3. The world of professional wrestling has always attracted strong personalities, and when Paul Orndorff and Tony Atlas crossed paths, their clash was perhaps inevitable. Both men were the epitome of athleticism, chiseled physiques, unparalleled conditioning, and power that left audiences in awe. Their confrontation, which began in a car and ended in a hospital, demonstrated how quickly wrestling technique could be employed in real-world altercations. Atlas, a skilled amateur wrestler, neutralized Orndorff's attempted sucker punch with a move known as a crater, a hold so effective that Orndorff's only recourse was to bite Atlas's ear. The bite would require medical attention and an overnight hospital stay, with doctors warning Atlas about the particular dangers of human bites. This incident stands as a testament to the real fighting skills that often lurked beneath the theatrical performances of professional wrestling. Number 4. Sometimes the most intense backstage conflicts arose from in-ring issues, as demonstrated by the altercation between ravishing Rick Rude and the Ultimate Warrior. Despite their electric on-screen chemistry, which produced some of the finest matches of the late 1980s, including their legendary bout at SummerSlam 1989, tensions simmered behind the scenes. Rude, renowned for his technical proficiency and ability to carry less skilled opponents to great matches, finally reached his breaking point with Warrior's reckless style. After one particularly stiff match, Rude cautioned Warrior about working safely in the ring. When Warrior dismissively responded that he didn't need to be careful because he was the Warrior, Rude responded with a knockout blow that laid out the muscle-bound superstar. While accounts vary as to whether Warrior was rendered unconscious or merely knocked down, there's no dispute about who emerged victorious in this real-life confrontation. Number 5. The Tale of Dynamite Kid versus the Fabulous Rougeaus stands as one of the most violent backstage incidents in wrestling history. In the late 1980s, fueled by a cocktail of drugs and aggression, Dynamite Kid blindsided Jacques Rougeau with a vicious assault that left Jacques' face swollen and bruised. The retaliation would come later, and it would be brutal. In a scene witnessed by Federation producer Bruce Pritchard, Jacques confronted Dynamite near the catering area, armed with a fistful of coins. The ensuing attack left Dynamite's face a bloody mess, with teeth scattered across the floor and blood pouring from his mouth and nose like a faucet. The situation was so serious that it required an emergency roster meeting presided over by Vince McMahon, Pat Patterson, and Hulk Hogan himself. Number 6. When Ken Shamrock encountered the Nasty Boys in a bar in October 1990, it set in motion a chain of events that would result in one of the most brutal backstage fights in wrestling history. After Brian Knobbs repeatedly harassed a female friend of Shamrock's, tensions escalated until the Nasty Boys were ejected from the bar. But Shamrock, his anger not yet satisfied, followed them to their hotel room. What ensued was a violent melee that saw Jerry Saggs hurled through a television set before the tide turned dramatically. Saggs struck Shamrock from behind with a telephone, its metal base plate rendering him unconscious. The aftermath was severe. Shamrock suffered a broken sternum, eye socket and nose, along with a concussion. If not for the intervention of other wrestlers, the situation might have become even more grave, as the Nasty Boys were reportedly planning to throw the unconscious Shamrock from the balcony. Number 7. The reputation of Haku as one of wrestling's most legitimately dangerous men was cemented in his confrontation with Brutus the Barber Beefcake. When Beefcake filed a complaint about Haku's stiff wrestling style, Haku's response was swift and terrifying. He found Beefcake in the shower area and proceeded to choke him until he turned blue, at one point lifting the muscular Beefcake 2 feet off the ground. The scene was so intimidating that despite a locker room full of professional wrestlers, no one dared to intervene, as it took the arrival of Hulk Hogan himself to talk Haku down. The incident left such an impression on Beefcake that he would later describe Haku as a legitimate killer, capable of taking multiple lives with his bare hands. Number 8. The 1995 confrontation between Vader and Paul Orndorff demonstrated how quickly workplace tensions could escalate into violence. When Vader arrived late for a promo filming, Orndorff, then working in production, pressured him to hurry. The exchange of words quickly turned physical when Vader struck Orndorff in the chest, knocking him to the ground. What happened next would become the stuff of legend. Orndorff, wearing only sandals, responded with a haymaker that floored the 400-pound Vader, then proceeded to stomp him repeatedly until they were separated. While Vader would later claim he chose not to fight back due to Orndorff's management position, the irony of this excuse wasn't lost on those who remembered Vader throwing the first punch. Number 9. The 1997 backstage brawl between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart represented the boiling point of one of wrestling's most famous real-life feuds. The catalyst was Michaels' infamous Sunny Days promo, where he implied Hart was having an affair with Tammy Sunny Sycho. The accusation caused problems in Hart's personal life, leading to a confrontation in Michaels' dressing room that quickly turned physical. According to Jim Ross, the fight was intense enough that even the legendary Pat Patterson was taken down while trying to separate them. The most visible damage was to Michaels' hair, which Hart had been ripping and tearing at throughout the fight. While neither man suffered serious injury, the incident would foreshadow the infamous Montreal Screwjob that would occur 6 months later. Number 10. Our final tale of backstage violence involves Kevin Wachholtz, better known as Nails, and Federation owner Vince McMahon himself. In 1992, following SummerSlam at London's Wembley Stadium, Nails confronted McMahon in his office over what he perceived as inadequate pay for his performance. When McMahon dismissed his concerns, Nails allegedly attacked him, knocking McMahon over in his chair as he violently choked him. The assault not only cost Nails his job, but also a planned main event program with the Ultimate Warrior. However, the story takes an ironic twist, as during McMahon's 1994 steroid trial, Nails appeared as a witness for the prosecution, but performed so poorly on the stand, contradicting himself repeatedly, that he may have inadvertently helped secure McMahon's acquittal. The date is March 24, 1991. The Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena is a fever pitch of sound and spectacle, packed with over 16,000 fans eager to witness the grand theater of WrestleMania 7. The golden age of the World Wrestling Federation is in full bloom, a time when the industry revels in the excess of larger-than-life personalities, bombastic entrances, and a sheer disregard for subtlety. Among the night's defining moments, a pair of brash, scrappy brawlers are about to etch their names into wrestling lore. With their trademark leather trench coats and unkempt appearance, the Nasty Boys of Brian Knobbs and Jerry Saggs stand across the ring from the reigning tag team champions of the Hart Foundation. Bret the Hitman Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart, technicians of the highest caliber, represent the old guard of tag team excellence. The Hearts are a study in precision, consisting of quick tags, seamless teamwork, and a mastery of psychology that has made them one of the most respected duos in the industry. The Nasty Boys are a completely different breed. Unrefined and unrelenting, they embody a maelstrom of dirty tactics and unorthodox offense, and they look the part, with their wild mullets, graffitied attire, and sunglasses hiding the kind of mischievous eyes that suggest a bar fight is always just around the corner. The match is a war of contrasts, consisting of technical mastery versus blunt force brutality. But in the end, chaos prevails. As the bout reaches its climax, with all four men embroiled in mayhem, Jimmy Hart, manager extraordinaire and devious opportunist, tosses his signature motorcycle helmet into the ring. With the referee's back turned, the implement finds its mark on a vulnerable Neidhart with devastating effect. The anvil crumples to the mat, and the referee turns just in time to count the fateful three. The Nasty Boys, against the odds, are the new Federation Tag Team Champions. They celebrate with reckless abandon, hoisting their newly won gold in the air, basking in the chorus of both boos and cheers. They are at the top of their game, and in this moment, they have solidified their place in the grand tapestry of professional wrestling's most electrifying era. Yet, for all the brutality they displayed inside the ring, their actions outside of it were even more infamous. The Nasty Boys weren't just a gimmick, they were a way of life. Their real-life reputation was the stuff of legend, including hard drinking, hard partying, and always a snide remark away from a brawl. Tales of their backstage antics and barroom skirmishes spread like wildfire, whispered from locker room to locker room. If there was trouble, the Nasty Boys were likely in the middle of it. But to understand the wild storm that was the Nasty Boys, one must first go back to where it all began. Brian Knobbs and Jerry Saggs weren't born into wrestling royalty. There was no storied lineage, no inside track to success. Both attended Whitehall High School in the heart of the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania, a region known for its blue-collar grit and unrelenting toughness, qualities that would define their careers. Their natural chemistry, forged through years of camaraderie, led them to create the Nasty Boys organically, a pairing born not from the drawing board but from the streets. The two stormed onto the professional wrestling scene in 1985, making their debut in the storied American Wrestling Association. By 1986, they had solidified their partnership under the moniker of the Nasty Boys, a fitting title for a duo defined by chaos and unrestrained aggression. Their ascent through the ranks took them to Memphis, where they sharpened their craft as a menacing heel faction colliding with the Rockers, a dynamic babyface team known for their high-flying prowess. The contrast was electric, the Nasty Boys, wild and unrelenting, against the Rockers, athletic and charismatic. In 1988, the Nasty Boys transitioned to Florida Championship Wrestling, where they achieved remarkable success by securing the Tag Team Championship 5 times over the course of the next 2 years. By 1990, the Nasty Boys had battered their way through the territories and arrived in World Championship Wrestling, ready to make an impact. Their unrelenting brawling style immediately put them at odds with the Steiner brothers. A heated feud erupted, with Saggs and Knobbs relentlessly pursuing the Tag Team Championship. Yet despite their brutality, the titles remained just out of reach, and by December 1990, they had set their sights on an even bigger stage. Departing the promotion, they jumped ship to the World Wrestling Federation, making their official debut on the December 29th episode of Superstars of Wrestling, a moment that would mark the beginning of their rise to infamy in the company's golden era. With the ever-opportunistic Jimmy Hart by their side, the Nasty Boys wasted no time making their presence felt in the Federation, vowing to nasticize the competition with their signature brand of chaos. Their path to dominance accelerated on February 16, 1991, when they outlasted 6 other teams in a grueling battle royale on Superstars, emerging as the #1 contenders for the coveted Tag Team Championship. It was a statement victory, unapologetically ruthless, undeniably effective, and it signaled to the entire Federation roster that Saggs and Knobbs weren't here to play by the rules. They were here to take over. As highlighted earlier, at WrestleMania 7, the Hart Foundation defended their titles against the unruly Nasty Boys. In a chaotic climax, Jerry Saggs blindsided Jim Neidhart with a motorcycle helmet, setting up Brian Knobbs for the pinfall. With that ruthless maneuver, the Nasty Boys secured their first Federation Tag Team Championship victory. Their reign lasted 5 months until SummerSlam at Madison Square Garden on August 26th, where they fell to the unstoppable force of the Legion of Doom in a brutal, no disqualification, no count-out showdown. The Nasty Boys then ignited rivalries with the Rockers and the Bushwhackers, culminating in a high-stakes clash at Survivor Series in Detroit. Aligned with the Beverly Brothers, they emerged victorious against both teams in a hard-fought battle. In early 1992, the Nasty Boys found themselves locked in a heated feud with Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Sergeant Slaughter. The rivalry reached its boiling point at WrestleMania 8 in Indianapolis, where they joined forces with the Mountie and Repo Man for an explosive 8-man tag team match. In the end, Duggan, Slaughter, Big Boss Man, and Virgil emerged victorious, handing the Nasty Boys a bitter defeat. That fall, the Nasty Boys severed ties with Jimmy Hart, turning face after he snubbed them for a tag team championship opportunity. When Hart bypassed them in favor of Money Inc. for a title match against the Natural Disasters, the betrayal was the final straw, prompting the Nasty Boys to strike out on their own. At Survivor Series, the Nasty Boys joined forces with the Natural Disasters to score a decisive victory over Money Inc. and the Beverly Brothers. However, despite their triumph in the elimination match, Knobbs and Sags fell short in their pursuit of reclaiming the tag team titles. On the March 13, 1993 episode of Superstars, the Nasty Boys made a pivotal decision, relinquishing their rightful title opportunity to pave the way for Hulk Hogan and Brutus Beefcake. This selfless move granted the Megamaniacs a shot at Money Inc.'s Tag Team Championship on the grand stage of WrestleMania 9. The Nasty Boys subsequently engaged in a heated house show series against the Head Shrinkers, with their battles frequently ending in chaotic double disqualifications. The animosity soon spilled onto Federation television, culminating in another volatile showdown against Fatu and Samu on the Italian broadcast of Superstars. The match dissolved into mayhem as both teams unleashed steel chairs in a post-match brawl. In April 1993, following their European tour, the Nasty Boys found themselves abruptly sidelined, suspended, and ultimately dismissed from the Federation, end of their tenure with the company. The Nasty Boys returned to World Championship Wrestling in July 1993 under Missy Hyatt, winning the Tag Team Championship at Full Brawl before trading it back and forth. In 1994, they brawled with Cactus Jack and Max Payne, later losing the titles to Jack and Kevin Sullivan in a Slamboree street fight. By mid-1994, they turned face, feuding with Harlem Heat and the Blue Bloods, winning their third title at Slamboree 1995 before quickly losing it back. In 1996, the New World Order tricked and attacked them, leading to a match where Sags mistakenly thought Scott Hall had hit him with a chair, retaliating by knocking out Hall's tooth, only to later learn it was Nash. After filing a lawsuit, Sags was released in early 1997 and retired, while Knobbs pursued the Hardcore Championship. Fast forward 10 years to November 20th, 2007, and Brian Knobbs and Jerry Sags reunited as the Nasty Boys for their first WWE match in 14 years, defeating Dave Taylor and Drew McIntyre on SmackDown in Tampa, only to be released the next day for seemingly working the match too stiff. But this was just the tip of the iceberg when it came to their controversial behavior, as the Nasty Boys' antics outside the ring were far more shocking than anything scripted in the squared circle. In October 1990, one such notorious incident occurred when Ken Shamrock, then a young wrestler, found himself at a Carolina bar where the inebriated Nasty Boys crossed the line, allegedly groping a woman in his group. When Shamrock intervened, chaos erupted. But before he could strike, the bouncers threw Knobbs and Sags out. Enraged, Shamrock tracked them to their hotel, kicked down their door and stormed inside, only to be blindsided by a steel-plated phone to the skull before having his nose and sternum both broken. Beaten unconscious and nearly tossed off a balcony, he barely survived, saved only by a last-second intervention. And of course, then there were the numerous wild backstage run-ins. At one independent show, Brian Knobbs found himself on the wrong end of the late New Jack's temper after an apparent racist joke. Before things could get truly nasty, Jack threw a punch that sent Knobbs to the ground before the fight was broken up. The legacy of the Nasty Boys transcends mere wordplay. They embodied authenticity in an era of exaggerated characters. While their contemporaries often performed outlandish personas, Brian Knobbs and Jerry Sags simply amplified their natural inclinations. In an industry where the line between fiction and reality is often carefully maintained, the Nasty Boys made their mark by simply being themselves, unapologetically rough, genuinely intimidating, and yes, legitimately nasty. Their enduring impact on professional wrestling stems not from their championship victories or memorable matches alone, but from their unwavering commitment to living their gimmick 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, proving that sometimes the most effective character is no character at all. The date is March 31st, 1985. Madison Square Garden pulses with an electric anticipation that transcends ordinary sporting spectacle. The air is thick with testosterone, sweat, and raw human drama. At the center of this maelstrom stands Paul Orndorff, Mr. Wonderful, a physical specimen so meticulously sculpted he seems chiseled from marble by the most exacting of Renaissance artists. WrestleMania 1 is more than a wrestling event. It's a cultural phenomenon that will reshape entertainment, athletics, and the very concept of staged combat. And Paul Orndorff is not just a participant, he is a pivotal character in this unfolding narrative of larger-than-life masculinity and performative aggression. Here he stands, shoulder to shoulder with Roddy Piper, facing off against Hulk Hogan and Mr. T in a collision of charisma and spectacle. This isn't just the main event, it's the blueprint for every WrestleMania that follows, an audacious gamble that redefines wrestling forever. Mr. Wonderful's physique is a weapon. Each muscle group is defined with surgical precision, a testament to countless hours of relentless training and iron discipline. His heel persona, the arrogant, beautifully conditioned antagonist, represents something more than mere character. He embodies a transformation occurring in professional wrestling, where athletes are becoming less about brute strength and more about aesthetic perfection and calculated performance. To truly understand Paul Orndorff, we must journey back to his origins, to the crucible that would forge one of professional wrestling's most compelling figures. Born on October the 29th, 1949 in Brandon, Florida, Paul Parlett Orndorff Jr. emerged into a world that would not come easily to him. His childhood in a working-class family was marked by struggle and an intrinsic drive that would become his most defining characteristic. Growing up in Tampa during the 1950s and 60s, young Paul was not immediately destined for athletic greatness. He was smaller than many of his peers, which might have deterred a less determined individual. But determination was Paul Orndorff's first language. Football became his initial arena of ambition. He discovered not just an athletic outlet, but a pathway to self-transformation. Despite his relatively modest size, Orndorff's work ethic was extraordinary. He wasn't just playing football, he was reimagining himself through physical discipline. His collegiate football career at the University of Tampa continued this trajectory. Here he began to understand that physical excellence was not just about natural talent, but about relentless, almost obsessive commitment. Football was teaching him something profound about human potential, that limitations are often more mental than physical. He eventually transitioned from fullback to tight end during his senior year, amassing over 2,000 all-purpose yards and 21 touchdowns in a standout college career. Drafted by the New Orleans Saints in 1973 as a potential dual-role player, Orndorff walked away from the NFL during training camp, citing personal issues and a growing interest in professional wrestling. A brief stint with the Chicago Bears and an injury-plagued tenure in the World Football League further nudged him toward wrestling, a path that would ultimately transform him into an iconic figure in sports entertainment. After stepping away from football, Orndorff's entry into professional wrestling was sparked by a connection through his father-in-law, leading to a debut in 1976 with Mid-Southern Wrestling, where he immediately clashed with rising star Jerry Lawler. By 1977, he had captured the NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship and later made his mark in the tri-state promotion, engaging in a fierce rivalry with Ernie Ladd that saw him claim and briefly hold the North American heavyweight title twice. Riding high on his success, Orndorff cemented his reputation in the National Wrestling Alliance, battling the Masked Superstar and earning the moniker the Brandon Bull, a nod to his football roots. By 1979, he had claimed gold alongside Jimmy Snuka as World Tag Team Champions and later dominated the Southeast Championship wrestling scene, capturing tag team titles with partners like Dick Slater and Norvell Austin, each reign punctuating his rise through the ranks of wrestling greatness. In 1980, Orndorff transitioned fully to the Mid-South territory, where his fiery feuds and dramatic storylines solidified his reputation. From defeating Ken Mantell in a hair-raising rivalry to turning heel after Jake the Snake Roberts claimed the North American title he coveted, Orndorff's complex persona captivated fans. Winning the title himself on July 4, 1981, he battled icons like Ted DiBiase and Dusty Rhodes before betrayal by Bob Roop ignited a bitter feud that ultimately pushed Orndorff to exit the Mid-South scene. In early 1982, Orndorff returned to Georgia Championship Wrestling, igniting a fierce rivalry with Buzz Sawyer that culminated in him capturing the National Heavyweight Championship. While briefly vacating the title to chase Ric Flair's World Championship, Orndorff refocused on reclaiming his vacated gold, battling the Super Destroyer and the Masked Superstar in a whirlwind of title exchanges throughout the year. His reign came to an end after Larry Zbyszko orchestrated a controversial plot involving killer Tim Brooks, leading to the title's vacancy. Seeking fresh challenges, Orndorff ventured to New Japan Pro Wrestling in 1983, competing against top talents like Riki Choshu and Antonio Inoki, and forging an unforgettable partnership with Big John Studd. By the time Orndorff arrived in the World Wrestling Federation, he was not just another wrestler. He was a carefully constructed archetype of masculine bravado. He made an unforgettable debut on January 23, 1984, defeating Salvatore Bellomo at Madison Square Garden, immediately catapulting himself into the main event spotlight. His matches were performances, his promos theatrical monologues. He didn't just wrestle, he told stories with his body, his expressions, his carefully cultivated arrogance. His most significant early Federation storyline involved Rowdy Roddy Piper, a partnership that would define the emerging era of wrestling as dramatic narrative. Piper was in fact the one who gave Orndorff the Mr. Wonderful moniker. Together, they represented a new breed of heel, not just villains, but complex, charismatic antagonists that audiences loved to hate. As referenced in the introduction, their most famous collaboration was a tag team that challenged the immensely popular Mr. T and Hulk Hogan leading into WrestleMania 1. This wasn't just a wrestling match, it was a cultural moment that would help transform professional wrestling from a niche entertainment into a global phenomenon. It was theater, it was spectacle, it was a referendum on emerging media narratives about masculinity, celebrity, and performance. Orndorff, paired with Piper, represented a kind of calculated villainy that was becoming wrestling's most compelling storytelling mechanism. During the match, Orndorff's manager Bob Orton's interference backfired disastrously when his cast accidentally struck Orndorff, allowing Hogan to secure the win. Furious over the loss, Piper and Orton attacked Orndorff on Saturday night's main event, but later that night, Orndorff stormed back to the ring to save Hogan from a 2-on-1 assault, marking a dramatic shift in alliances. Cementing his babyface turn, Orndorff publicly severed ties with manager Bobby Heenan, signaling a new chapter in his career. Orndorff and Hogan joined forces to wage war against Piper and Orton, battling them in high-stakes tag team matches across the country. While Hogan focused on defending his title, Orndorff took on both Piper and Orton in fierce singles competition, with their clashes often ending inconclusively. After firing Heenan, Orndorff became a marked man as Heenan placed a $25,000 bounty on him, later raising it to $50,000 when no one succeeded. The escalating chaos drew Bruno Sammartino into the fray as a special referee, but when Piper and Orton turned their aggression towards Sammartino, he teamed up with Orndorff, intensifying the feud. Meanwhile, Orndorff also allied with Andre the Giant and faced new threats, including a double countout showdown with Don Muraco as Hogan prepared for his WrestleMania 2 clash with King Kong Bundy. Soon, Adrian Adonis began relentlessly mocking Orndorff, calling him Hulk Jr., and taunting him for allegedly softening from his association with Hogan. The tension escalated when a televised phone call from Hogan, where Orndorff was told Hogan was too busy training to speak, pushed Orndorff to prove his independence. During their next match against the Moondogs, Orndorff wrestled solo to outshine Hogan, and in a later bout against Big John Studd and Bundy, a collision with Hogan appeared to injure Orndorff, leading to his delayed return to the ring, only for him to shockingly turn on Hogan with a devastating clothesline along with his trademark piledriver. His feud with Hulk Hogan became particularly noteworthy. What made this rivalry compelling was not just athletic competition, but a nuanced psychological drama played out in and around the wrestling ring. Their matches were rarely just about winning or losing. They were elaborate metaphors, Hogan representing an idealized, almost cartoonish American heroism, while Orndorff embodied a more complex, narcissistic ambition. Each encounter was a chapter in an ongoing saga of masculine competition and performative aggression. By 1986, Orndorff had undergone a fascinating character transformation. From a pure heel, he began transitioning into a more nuanced performer, sometimes villain, sometimes anti-hero. This fluidity was revolutionary. He wasn't locked into a simplistic good guy, bad guy binary, but existed in a more sophisticated narrative space. His matches demonstrated his capacity for complex storytelling. Each bout was a piece of long-form dramatic performance, with Orndorff as its complex muscular protagonist. The late 1980s saw Orndorff dealing with significant physical challenges. A neck injury threatened to derail his career, a common occupational hazard in a profession that demanded superhuman physical performance. But true to his character, Orndorff approached rehabilitation with the same intensity he brought to wrestling. His ability to return to the ring after serious injury became in itself a compelling narrative. He wasn't just a wrestler, he was a symbol of physical resilience. Each comeback was a statement about human potential, about refusing to be defined by physical limitations. By the early 1990s, the wrestling landscape was changing. The Federation was becoming a global entertainment brand, and performers like Orndorff were transitioning into new roles. He made a return to WCW and continued wrestling, engaging in notable feuds with the likes of Cactus Jack and Dustin Rhodes. But his significance was increasingly historical, a bridge between wrestling's territorial past and its global future. The later years of his life were marked by significant health challenges. On January 5, 2011, Orndorff revealed that he had been diagnosed with throat cancer, with doctors giving him only days to live while he relied on a feeding tube. Against the odds, he triumphantly announced on August 10th that the cancer had disappeared. However, just over a decade later, on July 12, 2021, Orndorff passed away at the age of 71 in Atlanta, Georgia, succumbing to the ravages of dementia. In 2005, Orndorff was immortalized with an induction into the WWE Hall of Fame, cementing his legacy as one of the industry's all-time greats. In the grand narrative of professional wrestling, Paul Orndorff represents a critical evolutionary moment, a performer who understood that wrestling was never just about winning or losing, but about telling compelling human stories through the most visceral of physical languages. Mr. Wonderful wasn't just a nickname, it was a statement about athletic potential, about the capacity for human transformation. May he rest in peace. The date is April 5, 1992, and the Indiana Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis is charged with electricity, packed to the rafters with over 62,000 raucous fans. WrestleMania 8 is in full swing, and the main event is about to begin. As Real American blares through the arena, the beloved Hulk Hogan makes his way to the ring in his signature red and yellow attire. But tonight, something is different. The crowd's cheers are tinged with an undercurrent of anticipation, even trepidation, because across the ring stands a towering figure, a man whose very presence seems to darken the atmosphere. At 6'9" and 317 pounds of chiseled muscle, Sid Justice looms like a colossus. His wild, unkempt hair frames a face contorted with barely contained rage. As he paces the ring, his eyes dart maniacally, promising violence. This is not just another opponent for Hogan. This is a force of nature, a man who has spent months tormenting the Hulkster and now stands poised to usurp his throne as the Federation's top star. The bell rings, and what unfolds is not just a wrestling match, but a clash of titans that will be etched in the annals of sports entertainment history. Sid's raw power and unbridled aggression prove a perfect foil for Hogan's heroic persona. As the two behemoths collide, the crowd is whipped into a frenzy, their loyalties torn between the familiar hero and this compelling new villain. This moment, this match, represents the pinnacle of Sid Justice's first run in the World Wrestling Federation. But how did this small-town boy transform into the psychotic powerhouse that now commanded the attention of millions? Born on December 16, 1960, Sidney Ray Udy's journey to wrestling stardom began in the heartland of Arkansas, where he spent his formative years, in a world far removed from the glitz and glamour of professional wrestling. As a young man, Sid was more interested in other sports, particularly baseball. In fact, he once said that he would cry if a baseball game got rained out. Such was his passion for the sport. Udy was deeply rooted in the agricultural lifestyle, working on a sprawling farm that boasted over 100,000 acres. This wasn't just any farm job. Sid had aspirations of becoming a crop duster, studying aviation with the intent of taking to the skies over the vast fields he tended. However, fate had different plans, taking Sid down a path to professional wrestling, albeit an unconventional one. Unlike many of his contemporaries who grew up idolizing wrestlers and dreaming of stepping into the ring, Sid stumbled into the business almost by accident. In the mid-1980s, while working out at a gym in Memphis, Tennessee, he caught the eye of several wrestlers who were part of the local territory. They saw in Sid what promoters would see for years to come, a physical specimen with the potential to be a major draw. Among those who noticed Sid was none other than Macho Man Randy Savage. Savage, along with his brother Lanny Poffo and Hillbilly Jim, who was then known as Harley Davidson, encouraged Sid to give wrestling a try. At first, Sid was hesitant. After all, he hadn't watched wrestling since he was a child, but his wife was pregnant, and the lucrative financial potential was appealing. In a later interview, Sid would admit, "I never had the love for the business. It was really just to make money." This pragmatic approach to wrestling would define much of Sid's career, setting him apart from many of his peers who lived and breathed the business. Sid's wrestling career began in 1987 in Continental Championship Wrestling, where he wrestled under a mask as Lord Humongous. From there, Sid moved on to New Japan Pro Wrestling and had a brief stint in World Class Championship Wrestling before landing in World Championship Wrestling in 1989. It was in WCW that Sid began to make a name for himself as Sid Vicious. His imposing presence and raw power made him stand out, even in an era when larger-than-life characters were the norm. Sid's time in WCW was marked by high-profile feuds and alliances, including a partnership with Dan Spivey as the Skyscrapers. But it was his move to the World Wrestling Federation in 1991 that would truly catapult Sid to superstardom. Debuting as Sid Justice, he was immediately positioned as a major player. His first significant storyline saw him as the special guest referee for the SummerSlam 1991 main event between Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior against the Triangle of Terror. This role put Sid front and center, showcasing his imposing presence to the WWF audience. Sid's rise in the Federation was meteoric. By the end of 1991, he was already being positioned as a potential successor to Hulk Hogan. The WWF even staged a passing of the torch moment, with Hogan and Sid performing a pose-down together. However, this segment didn't sit well with Sid. In later interviews, he would call it the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life, feeling that it was a hollow gesture that didn't truly elevate his status. Despite his reservations, Sid continued to be pushed as a top star. He entered the 1992 Royal Rumble as a favorite to win, lasting until the final two before being eliminated by Ric Flair. This set the stage for his WrestleMania 8 showdown with Hogan, a match that was supposed to cement Sid's status as the company's top heel. However, the aftermath of WrestleMania 8 marked a turning point in Sid's WWF career. Despite the high-profile match and the intense feud with Hogan, Sid left the company shortly after. The reasons for his departure have been debated over the years, with Sid claiming that he was unhappy with his position in the company and the direction of his character. The reality, which UD later revealed, is that sometime in 1991, Sid found himself at a career crossroads, faced with a seemingly irresistible offer from WCW that promised $750,000 in guaranteed money, a significant increase from his $250,000 WWF salary. Despite initially deciding to make the jump back to WCW, Vince McMahon intervened, persuading Sid to remain with the WWF by dangling the prospect of a substantial payday from WrestleMania 8. Yet this promised windfall never materialized, leaving Sid feeling disillusioned and resentful about the financial opportunity he had foregone. After leaving the WWF, Sid returned to WCW for a brief stint, but this run was cut short by a notorious incident in October 1993. During a tour in England, Sid was involved in a hotel room brawl with Arn Anderson that resulted in both men being stabbed with scissors. Fellow wrestler 2 Cold Scorpio intervened in the altercation, an act widely credited with saving Anderson's life. The incident led to Sid's release from WCW and left a black mark on his reputation in the industry. For many wrestlers, such an incident might have spelled the end of their career in major promotions, but Sid's unique combination of size, look, and charisma meant that doors remained open for him. In 1995, Despite the bad blood from his previous departure, Vince McMahon welcomed Sid back to the WWF. Unsurprisingly, Sid was initially hesitant to return due to the financial instability of working in the company, yet he ultimately agreed to rejoin after McMahon met his demands for a guaranteed weekly salary, securing the deal. Sid's return to the Federation on February 20th, 1995 was presented as a major event. Now known as Sycho Sid, he was immediately thrust into a high-profile role as the bodyguard of Shawn Michaels. This alliance, however, was short-lived. In one of the most memorable turns of the era, Sid attacked Michaels on the April 3rd, 1995 episode of Monday Night Raw, power-bombing him multiple times and again solidifying his status as one of the company's top heels. 2 weeks later, on the April 17th episode of Raw, the $1 Million Man unveiled Sid as the crown jewel of the $1 Million Corporation. The feud with Shawn Michaels would define much of Sid's 1995 run, as well as a notable non-title match against Intercontinental Champion Razor Ramon. Although this second WWF run would be interrupted by injury, a serious neck injury sidelined him in late 1995, forcing him to take time off, and he soon took on a role as an advertising representative in California while he recovered. This setback could have derailed Sid's career, but it ultimately set the stage for his most successful period in the Federation. Sid returned to WWF television in July 1996. Initially as a babyface, his comeback was marked by increased intensity and crowd support. The fans, who had once booed him as a villain, now cheered his devastating powerbomb finisher. The pinnacle of this period came on November 17th, 1996, at the Survivor Series pay-per-view. In front of a wild crowd in Madison Square Garden, Sid defeated Shawn Michaels to win his first WWF championship, yet his first reign as champion lasted just 2 months until January 19th, 1997, when he lost the title back to Michaels at the Royal Rumble. Nevertheless, his status as a main event player was now firmly established. Just over a month later, on February 17, 1997, Sid regained the championship by defeating Bret Hart on an episode of Monday Night Raw. This second reign would lead Sid to the main event of WrestleMania 13 on March 23rd. In a full-circle moment, Sid found himself headlining the Federation's biggest show of the year, just as he had 5 years earlier. This time, his opponent was The Undertaker. The match was a hard-hitting affair, showcasing Sid's power against The Undertaker's mystique. In the end, The Undertaker emerged victorious, ending Sid's second championship reign. Despite the loss at WrestleMania, Sid remained a key figure in the Federation throughout early 1997. He was involved in high-profile feuds and continued to be positioned as one of the company's top stars. However, fate would once again intervene in Sid's career. In July 1997, Sid suffered a neck injury that required surgery. This injury would mark the end of his second run with the WWF. After leaving, Sid would have one more run in WCW from 1999 to 2001, including a reign as heavyweight champion. Yet his time in WCW was marred by inconsistent booking and a devastating leg injury suffered at the Sin pay-per-view in 2001, effectively ending his full-time wrestling career. After this severe injury and the subsequent rehabilitation, Sid Justice made sporadic appearances in wrestling, including roles as a commissioner for World Wrestling All-Stars and matches in various independent promotions. Despite being told he would never run again, Justice's determination led him to not only walk, but eventually run once more. His last significant appearances in mainstream wrestling came in 2012 with WWE, participating in the build-up to Raw's 1000th episode. Justice's final match took place on August 5th, 2017, for Great North Wrestling in Ottawa, Ontario, marking the end of a career that spanned 3 decades and multiple major promotions. Looking back on Sid's career, it's a study in contrasts. He was a man who, by his own admission, entered wrestling primarily for the money, yet he achieved levels of success that many lifelong fans of the business never reached. He was a dominant physical Goliath who could command attention simply by walking into an arena, yet his most memorable moments often came from his promos, which ranged from intensely charismatic to unintentionally comical. Sid's legacy in professional wrestling is complex. He was never the most technically proficient wrestler, nor was he known for his long, epic matches. What Sid brought to the table was an undeniable presence and persona that fit perfectly with the larger-than-life world of professional wrestling. In many ways, Sid was a transitional figure in wrestling. He rose to prominence in the tail end of the Hulkamania era, reached his peak during the dawn of the Attitude Era, and had his final run as the Monday Night Wars were reaching their conclusion. Throughout these changing times in the business, Sid remained a constant, a towering, intimidating figure who could convincingly stand toe-to-toe with any opponent. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Sid's career is the disconnect between his approach to the business and his success within it. While many wrestlers speak of their passion for the industry, their lifelong dreams of being in the ring, Sid was always frank about his motivations. Wrestling was a job to him, a means to an end. Yet, this business-like approach didn't prevent him from connecting with audiences and achieving significant success. Tragically, on August 26, 2024, news broke that Sid Justice had passed away at the age of 63 after a lengthy battle with cancer. His son, Gunnar, shared the news on social media, describing his father as a man of strength, kindness, and love. In the end, Sid Justice, Sycho Sid, Sid Justice, whatever name you knew him by, left an indelible mark on professional wrestling. He was a commanding force in the ring, a memorable character outside of it, and a wrestler who achieved great success on his own terms. Love him or hate him, you couldn't ignore him, and in the world of professional wrestling, that just may be the highest compliment of all. Rest in peace, Sid. The powerbombs may have stopped, but the impact lives on. The date is January 19th, 1997. The Alamodome in San Antonio, Texas is a massive cathedral of chaos, pulsating with the energy of over 60,000 rabid fans. The Royal Rumble is in full swing, a symphony of anticipation and adrenaline electrifying the air. Suddenly, the entire arena is compelled to rise to its feet as a colossus steps into view, a force of nature draped in menace. Towering at 6 feet, 5 inches, and tipping the scales at over 400 pounds, the Leviathan known as Vader strides through the curtain. His black mask conceals his face but amplifies his aura, a symbol of destruction wrapped in leather and fury. The crowd is split. Cheers and jeers collide in a cacophony of awe and fear as the mastodon makes his way to the ring. Each step reverberates with the promise of violence. Soon the Undertaker arrives, his dark presence a worthy match for Vader's brutal ferocity. What unfolds is not merely a bout, but a war of titans. For over 13 grueling minutes, the squared circle becomes a battlefield. Vader unleashes an arsenal of raw power and startling agility, battering the dead man with the precision of a wrecking ball. This is Vader at his zenith, an indomitable juggernaut who doesn't just compete, but dominates. His mere presence elevates the Royal Rumble to a spectacle of mythic proportions. On this night, Vader doesn't just face The Undertaker, he cements his legacy as one of the most fearsome warriors to ever set foot in a WWF ring. But how did Leon Allen White become the monster known as Vader? To understand his rise to the top of professional wrestling, we need to go back to the beginning. Born on May 14, 1955 in Linwood, California, White seemed destined for athletic greatness from an early age. As a standout football player in high school, he earned a scholarship to the University of Colorado, where he was named a second-team All-American guard. His play on the field caught the attention of NFL scouts, and in 1978, he was drafted in the 3rd round by the Los Angeles Rams. White's NFL career was brief but memorable. During his second season, as part of the injured reserve list, he made it to Super Bowl 14, a member of the 1979 Rams team that lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Unfortunately, a devastating knee injury during training camp ended his football dreams prematurely. But this setback would ultimately lead White down a new path, one that would see him become one of the most renowned professional wrestlers of all time. In 1985, White began training under Brad Rheingans to become a pro wrestler. He made his debut for the American Wrestling Association in December of that year, under the ring name Baby Bull, which was eventually changed to Bull Power, a nod to his days as an offensive lineman. But it was a tour of Germany in 1987 that would change the trajectory of White's career forever. While competing for Otto Wanz's Catch Wrestling Association, he caught the eye of New Japan Pro Wrestling booker Riki Choshu. Impressed by White's combination of size, strength, and agility, Choshu invited him to come work in Japan. White made his debut for New Japan in December 1987 under the name Big Van Vader. The gimmick was inspired by Japanese folklore, with Vader wearing an intimidating black mask and helmet that shot smoke. It was in Japan that Vader truly came into his own as a performer, developing his hard-hitting style and signature moves like the Vader Bomb. In April of 1989, Vader reached the pinnacle of Japanese wrestling when he defeated Shinya Hashimoto to win the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. This victory made him the first foreign wrestler to hold New Japan's top title. Vader would go on to have 3 reigns as heavyweight champion over the next few years, establishing himself as one of the company's biggest stars. Vader's success in Japan opened doors for him internationally. He began working for World Championship Wrestling in 1990, while also continuing to compete for New Japan. Some of Vader's most memorable feuds during this period came against Sting, Ric Flair, and Cactus Jack. His brutal battles with Cactus Jack in particular have gone down in wrestling lore. Vader's reputation as a stiff worker who laid in his moves with full force only added to his mystique. He was a true monster heel who struck fear into both his opponents and the fans, but this intensity sometimes led to real-life incidents. In April of 1997, Vader was involved in a now infamous altercation in Kuwait during a WWF press event. When a TV host questioned whether wrestling was fake, Vader flipped over the desk and grabbed the host by the tie, shouting profanities. The incident led to Vader being arrested and detained in Kuwait for 10 days before finally being deported. In a subsequent interview, it emerged that this incident had been orchestrated by the show's producers as a calculated ploy to boost ratings. Unbeknownst to the host, who was left in the dark, the scheme led to him pressing charges against White. Despite this controversy, Vader's star continued to rise. He had captured his 3rd and final WCW World Heavyweight Championship by defeating Ric Flair, and throughout 1994 and 1995, he remained one of WCW's top attractions, feuding with the likes of Hulk Hogan, Sting, and Flair. In 1996, Vader made the jump to the World Wrestling Federation. He debuted at the Royal Rumble on January 21st, eliminating several competitors before being tossed out himself. Vader quickly established himself as a dominant force, engaging in high-profile feuds with Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, and Bret Hart. One of the highlights of Vader's WWF run came at SummerSlam on August 18, 1996. He challenged Shawn Michaels for the championship in the main event. Though he came up short, the match showcased Vader's ability to work with smaller, more agile opponents. His combination of power moves and surprising athleticism for his size made him a unique and formidable competitor. As we saw earlier, Vader's clash with The Undertaker at the 1997 Royal Rumble further cemented his status as a top-tier talent in the Federation. But despite his in-ring success, backstage politics and creative differences began to hamper Vader's push. By 1998, he found himself being used less frequently in high-profile matches. Vader's last major WWF storyline came in the summer of 1998, when he was relegated to the role of the Man They Call Vader, a play on his declining status in the company. This led to Vader threatening to kill himself on Monday Night Raw, though the angle was quickly dropped. He left the Federation in October 1998. Following his departure, Vader returned to Japan, where he continued to be revered as a major star. Vader's style and character remained hugely popular with Japanese fans well into the 2000s. But while his in-ring career continued to flourish, Vader's personal life was not without its struggles. Like many wrestlers of his era, he battled issues with substance abuse. His fondness for tequila in particular led to some dark moments and brushes with the law. One such incident allegedly occurred in 2002 at Vader's home in Colorado. According to reports, Vader had been drinking heavily and decided to take his car for an off-road excursion. He ended up totaling the vehicle near a lake before abandoning the wreckage and walking back to his house. When police officers arrived at Vader's home to investigate, they were met with hostility. The enormous wrestler allegedly threatened the officers and resisted arrest. It reportedly took 3 pairs of connected handcuffs to restrain Vader's arms behind his back, a testament to his incredible size and strength even while intoxicated. Perhaps most alarmingly, Vader is said to have threatened to kill the K9 unit dog that was present at the scene. This threat, combined with his belligerent behavior towards the officers, led to his arrest for public intoxication. While the full details of this incident remain somewhat murky, it paints a troubling picture of the demons Vader was battling outside the ring. In 2007, after enduring years of alcohol abuse and the relentless demands of travel, White faced the dissolution of his marriage, a pivotal moment that led him to abandon drinking and significantly reduce his travels. Despite his personal setbacks, Vader's legacy as one of professional professional wrestling's most dominant and influential big men remains secure. His combination of raw power and intense in-ring style made him a truly unique performer. Vader was capable of having compelling matches with opponents of all sizes, from high flyers like Shawn Michaels to fellow monsters like The Undertaker. Beyond his championship accolades, Vader's influence can be seen in many of the super heavyweight wrestlers who followed him. His ability to perform moonsaults and other agile maneuvers, despite his massive size, paved the way for modern-day big men who showcase similar athleticism. Vader's final years were marked by health struggles related to congestive heart failure. He underwent open-heart surgery in 2018, but sadly passed away on June 18th of that year at the age of 63. His death was mourned throughout the wrestling world, with colleagues and fans alike paying tribute to the man who redefined what it meant to be a monster heel. In looking back at Vader's career, it's impossible not to be in awe of his accomplishments. From his early days as a football player to his dominance in Japan and his runs atop WCW and the WWF, Vader was a true force of nature. His matches were spectacles, hard-hitting affairs that left audiences breathless and opponents battered. While his personal demons may have haunted him at times, in the ring Vader was untouchable. He commanded respect from his peers and struck fear into the hearts of fans around the world. For a generation of wrestling fans, the name Vader will always conjure images of an unstoppable monster, a true titan of the squared circle. He showed that wrestling, at its best, can be a visceral, emotional experience that resonates with audiences on a primal level. And for that, fans around the world will always remember the man they called Vader, a true legend of the squared circle. May he rest in peace. The date is April 1st, 1990. The Sky Dome in Toronto is packed with over 67,000 rabid fans, all eager to witness the spectacle of WrestleMania 6. The energy in the building is electric, a boiling cauldron of anticipation, as one of the most controversial and intimidating men in professional wrestling steps onto the grandest stage of them all. Clad in his signature black trunks, fists clenched, eyes burning with unrelenting intensity, here is Bad News Brown. His opponent is the legendary Rowdy Roddy Piper, a man who thrives on chaos, whose gift of the gab is only matched by his ability to fight. But on this night, Piper isn't stepping into the ring with just another opponent. He is up against a man who has carved out a reputation as one of the toughest, most dangerous figures in the industry. Bad News Brown wasn't the kind of heel that relied on theatrics. He didn't need elaborate promos or a stable of cronies backing him up. He carried himself with a quiet menace, an aura that told the world he was a man who walked alone. The World Wrestling Federation, in the midst of its golden era, was built on larger-than-life characters, including Hulk Hogan, The Ultimate Warrior, and Randy Savage. But Bad News Brown was a different breed altogether. He was raw, authentic, and in an era of scripted rivalries, he exuded an air of real danger. The fans knew it, and so did the wrestlers in the locker room. He wasn't merely playing a character, he was Bad News Brown through and through. Outside the ring, his reputation only grew. In an industry filled with men who built their personas around toughness, Brown was a former Olympic judo medalist, a man who had earned his stripes in some of the most brutal environments imaginable. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had been in real fights and had nothing to prove. Stories circulated about how even the biggest names in the business steered clear of crossing him. And yet, despite his undeniable talent, his unique presence, and his ability to captivate an audience, his career never reached the heights it deserved. A man who could have been a world champion, who could have stood at the pinnacle of the wrestling world, instead became a case of what could have been. His career in the Federation was marked by memorable feuds, moments of brilliance, but also a sense that the company never fully knew what to do with him. And then, tragically, far too soon, he was gone, in a sudden and heartbreaking end for a man who had spent his life fighting. To understand Bad News Brown, the man behind the scowl, behind the street-hardened bravado, we must go back. Before the Federation, before the sold-out arenas, and before he struck fear in the hearts of opponents. Born on October 22nd, 1943 in Harlem, New York, and raised in Queens, Alan James Coge grew up in an environment that required toughness as a prerequisite for survival. Queens in the 1940s and 50s was not an easy place for a young black man with ambition. Opportunities were scarce, and the streets could be merciless. But Coge was different. He had the drive to carve out something better, and he found his calling not in boxing, as so many others did, but in judo. It was an unconventional choice, but it would define the early part of his life. Koji dedicated himself to the discipline, training under legendary judokas and pushing himself to the absolute limit. His efforts paid off in 1976 when he won a bronze medal in judo at the Montreal Olympics. His triumph marked a historic first, making him the inaugural African-American to claim an individual Olympic medal outside the realms of boxing and track and field. This was no small feat. It was a moment that should have propelled him into the limelight, a moment that should have opened doors. But unlike boxers who won Olympic gold and were showered with lucrative offers, judokas received little more than a pat on the back. There was no million-dollar contract waiting for him, no sponsorship deals, just the harsh reality that he would need to find another way to make a living. Enter professional wrestling. It was in Japan that Koji first transitioned into the world of pro wrestling, training under the legendary Antonio Inoki. Japanese wrestling was different from the theatrical, over-the-top style of American wrestling. It was hard-hitting and brutal, a style that emphasized realism, and Koji thrived in it. He wrestled for New Japan Pro Wrestling under the name Buffalo Allen, quickly earning a reputation as one of the toughest foreigners to ever step foot in a Japanese ring. He wasn't there to play games, he was there to fight, and the Japanese fans respected that. Koji's first brush with the Worldwide Wrestling Federation came in February 1978, when he defeated Frank Williams under his birth name in a brief yet telling showcase. Returning in 1979, he became a regular presence on Championship Wrestling and even challenged for the North American Tag Team Championship at Madison Square Garden. By the early 1980s, he made his way to Stampede Wrestling, the legendary Canadian promotion run by Stu Hart. Stampede was infamous for its grueling training, its emphasis on real toughness. And Bad News Allen fit right in alongside the likes of Dynamite Kid, Bret Hart, and Davey Boy Smith. He became one of the most despised yet respected heels in the territory, a man who could generate heat like few others. But it wasn't just his ability to rile up the crowd, it was the way he carried himself. Other wrestlers might have put on an act, but Allen truly embodied the Bad News persona. It was only a matter of time before Vince McMahon's ever-expanding World Wrestling Federation came calling. Rebranded as Bad News Brown, he made his debut in the company in 1988. Brown's defining trait was an unwavering scowl, either etched in cold fury or breaking only for a loud, disdainful laugh at the misery of his opponents. He wasted no time in making waves by winning the Battle Royal at WrestleMania 4, eliminating Bret Hart in a stunning betrayal that kicked off a bitter feud. It soon became apparent that Brown was notably different from the other villains in the Federation at the time. He didn't rely on cheap heat or underhanded tactics. He was a lone wolf, an outsider who took what he wanted and answered to no one. Next came a brief yet fiery clash with World Heavyweight Champion Macho Man Randy Savage and his manager Miss Elizabeth in late 1988. During this period, Brown was thrust into a volatile storyline in which he stormed the Brother Love show, confronting Federation President Jack Tunney over being repeatedly denied title opportunities, an altercation that escalated into a physical assault on Tunney himself. On the March 11, 1989 edition of Saturday Night's Main Event, in a match against Hulk Hogan, Brown seized the microphone in a moment of sheer bravado, declaring it was time for the Ghetto Blaster. But as he prepared to unleash it, Hogan evaded the strike, turning Brown's bold proclamation into a costly misstep that sealed his eventual defeat. Brown's next war of words and fists erupted with Rowdy Roddy Piper, igniting at the 1990 Royal Rumble when Piper eliminated him, only for Brown to retaliate with an illegal elimination of his own. The fallout saw Brown mocked and jeered, a slight he answered with unrelenting venom, taunting Piper for his trademark kilt, dismissing it as nothing more than a skirt. As highlighted earlier, the feud reached its boiling point at WrestleMania 6, where their battle ended in a double countout. Originally set to continue their war, both men refused to take the fall, forcing the Federation to abandon the program entirely. Instead, Brown was pivoted into a heated clash with Jake the Snake Roberts, where he upped the ante by introducing a sewer rat in the form of an actual possum as a menacing counter to Roberts' infamous python. After SummerSlam in 1990, Brown departed the Federation, lamenting Vince McMahon's unfulfilled promise to elevate him as the company's first black champion. Koji spent several more years wrestling in various smaller promotions until retiring in 1999 due to knee injuries. Unlike many wrestlers, he didn't cling to the business. He moved on, working as a wrestling coach and security guard. But despite leaving wrestling behind, his reputation endured. In his autobiography, The Dynamite Kid recounted an incident where Cage overheard a racist remark allegedly made by Andre the Giant on the tour bus. In response, Cage ordered the driver to stop, exited the bus, and demanded that the Giant confront him in a one-on-one fight. Andre, however, remained seated and later offered an apology for his words. Yet fate would prove just as unyielding to Cage, as on March 6, 2007, the world received the news that Alan Cage had passed away from a heart attack at just 63 years old. It was sudden, unexpected, and a tragic end for a man who had spent his life fighting. Bad News Brown may not have held the championship. He may not have been given the main event push that so many of his peers received, but his impact remains undeniable. He was a pioneer who refused to compromise his principles for greater fame, a legitimate fighter who brought credibility to professional wrestling, and an Olympic medalist who helped bridge the gap between real combat sports and sports entertainment. He was, in every sense of the word, the real deal. The date is January 15th, 1989. The Houston Summit crackles with anticipation as the Royal Rumble unfolds before 19,000 fervent wrestling fans. The crowd is already on edge, electrified by the spectacle, when a match billed as a battle for supremacy takes center stage. Harley Race and Haku are set to determine who holds the crown as the king of the World Wrestling Federation. But for those who know the backstage lore, this match carries far more gravity than its storyline premise. These are not just performers. These are men whose reputations as legitimate tough guys in real life loom larger than the fictional personas they portray in the ring. Harley Race, at this point in his storied career, is a wrestling legend. Known for his unyielding toughness, Race has survived a fatal car accident, grueling matches, and countless barroom brawls, most of which he initiated or finished. He embodies the old-school ethos of professional wrestling, where the business demanded not just performance, but physicality, grit, and the ability to back up your words. It's said that Race once walked into a locker room, spotted Hulk Hogan, and knocked him to the floor with a single punch. When Hogan nervously joked about Race not being armed, Race calmly produced a revolver from his jacket, silencing the room. Haku, on the other hand, was a different breed of enforcer. By 1989, his reputation as one of the toughest men, if not the toughest, to ever lace up a pair of boots was firmly cemented. Stories of Haku's exploits outside the ring border on myth, but those who know him swear by their veracity. On one occasion, Haku reportedly bit off the nose of a man who disparaged him at an airport bar. And then there's the wild tale Kevin Sullivan once recounted about a night he and Haku stopped for beers at a local tavern. Not long after walking in, a pool player insulted Haku, triggering an explosive response where Haku swiftly incapacitated one man with a chokeslam before knocking another unconscious. The chaos escalated when Haku bit through a man's shirt, tore a chunk of flesh from his back, and spat it onto the floor. And yet, Haku and Race were not alone in their singular toughness. The world of wrestling, particularly in the Federation era, was populated by men whose real-life grit and resilience matched their larger-than-life personas. In no particular order, here are 13 more wrestlers from that era whose toughness was the stuff of legend. Number 3, Rick Rude was the epitome of arrogance in the ring, his swagger and machismo infuriating fans and opponents alike. But behind the bravado was a man of genuine toughness. A former bouncer, Rude was known for his willingness to throw hands if anyone dared challenge him. His chiseled physique wasn't just for show. He trained rigorously and was said to have an iron grip that could bring even the rowdiest troublemaker to his knees. In one memorable backstage incident, Rude reportedly knocked out the Ultimate Warrior after being provoked, proving that his moniker of ravishing belied a no-nonsense persona. Number 4, Steve Blackman was an enigma in the wrestling world, a man whose stoic demeanor masked a lethal skill set. Nicknamed the Lethal Weapon, Blackman's background in martial arts made him a formidable opponent both in and out of the ring. He was an expert in multiple disciplines, including kendo and jiu-jitsu, and his precise strikes were no mere theatrics. Teddy Long once recounted how Blackman floored the Big Show, hooking the giant's leg and dropping him with ease. And then there's the airport brawl, where after a drunken John Bradshaw's wild swings missed, Blackman's precise jabs rocked him until bystanders intervened. Number 5. Brock Lesnar's mere presence is enough to intimidate. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches and weighing nearly 300 pounds of pure muscle, Lesnar is a freak of nature. A former collegiate wrestling champion and UFC heavyweight title holder, Lesnar's credentials speak for themselves. During the infamous plane ride from hell, Curt Hennig's shaving cream prank on Lesnar spiraled into a heated grappling match that reportedly came dangerously close to opening the plane's emergency exit. While details remain murky, it seems as though Hennig soon regretted provoking the powerhouse. Number 6. The Iron Sheik was as volatile as they come. A former bodyguard for the Shah of Iran and an Olympic wrestler, Sheik brought a level of authenticity to his villainous persona that few could match. His legitimate grappling skills were paired with a fiery temper that often got him into trouble. In one incident, the Iron Sheik and Bruno Sammartino reminded the world what real toughness looks like when they squared off against half a dozen football players in a backstage brawl. Despite being in his 50s and long retired, Sammartino held his ground when ex-CFL player Dave Fleming and his crew refused to leave a backstage area. Outnumbered until the Iron Sheik joined the fray, the duo turned the tide, with Sammartino later recalling how they cleaned house against their unsuspecting challengers. Number 7. Scott Steiner was the definition of a physical powerhouse. Known for his freakishly muscular physique and explosive intensity, Steiner was a legitimate athlete who excelled in collegiate wrestling before transitioning to the professional ranks. His strength was matched by his unpredictable nature, which was on full display when targeting Diamond Dallas Page during an explosive backstage confrontation. With zero hesitation, Steiner unleashed his fury, overpowering Page in a vicious brawl that left onlookers fearing for Page's life. Number 8. Kurt Angle's toughness is etched in Olympic gold. Competing in the 1996 Summer Olympics with a broken neck, Angle's victory in freestyle wrestling is a testament to his unparalleled determination and pain tolerance. In one particular backstage brouhaha, the tension between Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle boiled over as Guerrero lunged for a takedown, only for Angle's superior amateur wrestling prowess to effortlessly neutralize him, forcing Eddie to regain his composure. Number 9. Dan Severn was a pioneer of crossover athletes, blending professional wrestling with the emerging world of mixed martial arts. A multiple-time UFC champion, Severn's grappling skills and raw power made him a formidable opponent in any arena. His calm demeanor belied a ferocity that could be unleashed at a moment's notice. Wrestlers who faced Severn often remarked on his incredible strength and technical prowess, qualities that earned him the nickname The Beast. Whether in a cage or a ring, Severn's toughness was never in question. Number 10. Ken Shamrock, like Severn, was a trailblazer who bridged the gap between wrestling and mixed martial arts. Dubbed the world's most dangerous man, Shamrock's combination of striking and submission skills made him a fearsome competitor. His battles in the UFC and his tenure in the WWF showcased his versatility and tenacity. Shamrock's intense training regimen and fearless approach to competition earned him a reputation as one of the toughest individuals in the business. Number 11. The Barbarian was aptly named. With his imposing frame and raw power, Barbarian was a physical specimen who commanded attention. Like Haku, Barbarian hailed from the rugged lands of Tonga, where both men were forged in the same fire, embodying an unparalleled toughness that set them apart. Barbarian's strength was the stuff of legend, yet his calm demeanor masked a fiery side that few dared to provoke. Number 12. Ron Simmons was a trailblazer in every sense of the word. As the first African-American world champion in sports entertainment history, Simmons' toughness extended beyond the physical realm. Kurt Angle once revealed on his podcast that while Simmons commanded respect for his in-ring accomplishments, it was his reputation as a legitimate locker room enforcer, capable of besting anyone in a real fight, that truly made him a figure of fear. Number 13. Bruno Sammartino was the embodiment of old-school toughness. As a champion who held the Federation title for an unprecedented 2,803 days, Bruno Sammartino's legendary resilience was tested when he suffered a legitimate neck fracture during a match against Stan Hansen at Madison Square Garden, the result of a botched move that left him dropped on his head. Astonishingly, Sammartino returned just 2 months later, seeking redemption in a high-stakes rematch at Shea Stadium, a bout that would earn the coveted Match of the Year title from Pro Wrestling Illustrated in 1976. Number 14, a former judoka who won a bronze medal at the 1976 Olympics, Bad News Brown brought a unique skill set to professional wrestling. His no-nonsense attitude and willingness to stand up for himself earned him a reputation as someone you didn't mess with. One notable story involves Brown confronting Andre the Giant, a man many considered untouchable, over an apparent racist remark. Before long, Andre stepped down, wanting no part in a physical entanglement with Brown. Number 15, Paul Orndorff, known as Mr. Wonderful, combined charisma with legitimate toughness. A standout football player before entering wrestling, Orndorff's athleticism was matched by his fiery temperament. One infamous backstage altercation saw Orndorff stand toe-to-toe with Vader, a man significantly larger than him, and come out on top. But we'd love to know, who do you think was the toughest and most feared wrestler in the WWF days? Make sure to leave a comment below, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.